Welcome to the 46th episode of Renegade Marketers Live, a show that promises to be long on marketing insights and short on overhyped buzzwords. We'll be drinking in the latest tactics and the coolest gin. Yep, this may be the only live marketing show that also features a gin tasting. This show is being live streamed via our friends at Restream, and if you want to drink along at home, today we're tasting Hendrick's versus New Amsterdam. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. It's never been easy being a CMO, but I have to say it's getting more complicated by the minute. A recent poll among CFOs noted that 85% believe we're already in a slowdown and 61% expect these conditions to persist for at least another 6 months. And when CFOs get nervous, marketing budgets traditionally feel the pinch. Already we're hearing from CMOs that they are being asked to hold off making big commitments for Q1 2023, which begs the question, what can B2B CMOs do right now, knowing a recession may be already here or just around the corner? What can they do not just to protect their budgets, but more importantly, what can they do to protect their brands and their lead flow? To answer these questions and more, we've got Josh Leatherman, CMO of Service Express, here to share his hard-earned wisdom. Josh is the star of episode 179 of Renegade Marketers Unite and was on episode 13 of this show. So Josh, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am great. Thank you. This lovely Thursday afternoon. And so now where are you?
I am in beautiful Grand Rapids, Michigan at Service Express Global Headquarters. A big construction crane just pulled up literally behind me. So while it's quiet, I don't think it'll be too disruptive, but construction's a great sign of a growing company. So long answer, but headquartered in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
There it is. And now let's sort of, I have a tendency now on the show to sort of go back and look at people's LinkedIn's profile. And I noticed Cornerstone University. Not only did you get your BA, but your MBA from there, but you also spent 17 months as an adjunct professor. So what's the story behind this dedication?
I love Cornerstone. I grew up, Drew, in the small West Michigan town of Richland, Michigan, which is near Kalamazoo or Battle Creek. Have you heard of either of those? There's a song.
Sure, of course.
And the big city was Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's still the second largest city in Michigan. So wanted to go to Grand Rapids to go to college, go to the big city. Found Cornerstone, and what I love about Cornerstone is they've got a great adjunct faculty member. So you're not only getting the education, you get a lot of application on what you're learning. And so I had tremendous opportunities from teachers who plugged me into professional experience and jobs that I've had in my past because of Cornerstone, and went back to be an adjunct professor to kind of give back, right? I'm a big believer that when you receive gifts like that, it's your obligation to send the elevator back down or to give back.
I'm so with you. I was always so grateful that I got into Duke, that I just can't do enough for the university. It's like, you made a mistake, right? Well, okay, now that I've made it through the 4 years, I've really, and it's so rewarding. So good for you for recognizing that, because not all alums do it, even though they got the help, right? Yeah. They just sort of forget and go on. So now speaking of staying in Grand Rapids, you've been at Service Express for about 11 years, including the last 6 as CMO. I'm just going to emphasize that for a moment, the last 6 as CMO. And you've been part of a team that's grown the company from 30 million to 200 million in annual, 250 million, which is really amazing. How does this happen?
Yeah, 250, by the way, on a growth path to get to $500 million by 2025. So it's a high growth business. Revenue growth is a product of people growth. It's not vice versa. For a company to grow, the people must grow. For me, I've been surrounded by a fantastic executive team. I think you can probably speak more to this than me, Drew, but I think the CMO tenure, the CMO role is the lowest tenured role on the executive team. I think probably two reasons for that. One is CMOs they love to build and they love technology and they love to kind of set things up and they can get bored real quick and hop on to the next job. The other one is there are some CMOs who don't have great relationships with the executive team, the CFO, the board of directors, private equity. I've been able to, over the course of 11 years, establish great relationships with my executive team. I've built the marketing team and sales development team, revenue operations team. We had 2 people when I started. We've got probably close to 100 on all of those collective teams. Almost a quarter of Service Express in the US are either on the marketing team or marketing team alumni, meaning they started, we developed them, we grew them, and they've gone on to make a big impact into other areas of the business. But I just say the revenue growth is great, but that's a product of growing our people first, right?
Yeah, there's so many things I want to break down in that. First of all, the revenue growth is people growth. It's just a great statement. I want to use that because it is so important in this. I am guessing when we talk about CMO turnover, you're right in that number. Nobody ever talks about the fact that a lot of really good CMOs are builders, and that's what they like to do. And they do leave after 2 to 3 years because they've sort of built the marketing engine or are at a stage. So that part's true. I'm guessing you've had the same CEO for the last 6 years.
I have. Yeah, I have. For better, for worse. He actually just celebrated, Ron Elvesteffer, fantastic guy, just celebrated his 25th anniversary here. Like, that's unheard of. Just so I've served under him for my entire tenure.
So it's funny, the longest tenured CMO that I know of that I've interviewed is Kathy Button-Bell. She was, last count, 22 years on the job and had the same CEO the whole time at Emerson Electric. And I think that is one of the keys. So once you build that relationship, as you say, with the CEO and the executive committee, but one of the things that occurs to me is a $30 million company and a $250 million company are very different.
Yeah.
The marketing team that you need to support one versus the other, not just size, but the kinds of things that you do and you need to do and you need to understand are very different. Yeah. How did what kinds of things did you do to help yourself grow into that and keep growing with the company?
Yeah, I have a few beliefs. One is my people cannot grow unless I grow. I've got to lead by example. They can't grow unless I grow. Our business can't grow unless our people grow. I'm a firm believer that I am the average of the 15 people I surround myself with. And I've talked about it with you before, Drew. Do you remember what R&D stands for? I'm a big believer in R&D. Do you remember what that stands for?
I do. It's like rip off and duplicate.
Rip off and duplicate, right? Yes. Like others, I can't be the same CMO for a $250 million company that I was for a $30 million company or $100 million company. I also don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are other CMOs who have been CMOs of $250 million companies and $500 million companies. My job is to form relationships with them and build value for them, but also have them share their experience with me, right? And CMO Huddles has been a great way that I've done that. The Marketing Academy has been another one. My ability just to get in front of other CMOs and learn from them has been the most, because my formal education is in business. It's not marketing. Right. My informal education through the relationships and the networks I have is marketing and leadership, right? So R&D, rip off and duplicate, that's a secret to success as a growing professional. And by the way, that's not only applicable to being a CMO, that's also applicable to being a father, a husband, a leader. Like, think about all the roles you play in life, right? If you can surround yourself with people who have kind of been there, done that, and who can mentor and coach and lead you, you're going to be a lot better for it.
Yeah, amen to that. The Marketing Academy, I met Lisa Gilbert. Does that name ring a bell? Did you work with her at all through the Marketing Academy?
I didn't. I was in the Marketing Academy Fellowship Program, which is for CMOs. They also have, I can't remember the name of it, but it's another program for emerging marketing talent, kind of like the VP level, who have been identified as top talent, may move into the CMO type role. So it's a fantastic program. Cheryl, who runs the program, founded it, does a great job. And it's just been wonderful for me. So is CMO Huddles.
Yeah, well, no, I'm actually trying to learn more about Marketing Academy, because there's definitely a wonderful synergy between CMO Huddles and the Academy.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so you mentioned that the ambition is to get from 250 to 500 million, and it's as if you're thinking, well, there's no outside forces, and that you can keep growing regardless of what's happening in the world at large, and sometimes businesses can. But let's talk now about recession proofing your marketing, and let's assume there's lots of things that you can do. Let's start with one thing that you're thinking about right now in terms of that.
Yeah. So first of all, we just refuse to participate in recessions, Drew. I wish it were that easy, right? We just don't want to participate. I would say the first thing we're doing, which I learned from the pandemic, is you can recession-proof your business. You can look at your business and begin to scenario plan for your business, understand how the recession is changing for your customers. The most important thing you can do to recession-proof your business is begin to have conversations with your people. It's a leadership role. It's not a marketing role. It's not a business acumen role. I think as we enter, certainly tough economic times, as we enter the prospect of a potential recession, who knows if it's going to happen or not, or if it is happening, the reality is our people have degrees of anxiety and fear, and they want to understand, and they're looking at their job and they're going, hey, how is my company planning for a recession? Are they scenario planning? So oftentimes, like with my executive team, we are always scenario planning. We're always looking at what levers can we pull, but sometimes I forget to communicate the what and the why to my team, so that they, first of all, can work in an environment where they feel safe. Because people can't do their best work if they're working in fear, anxiety, uncertainty. So the first thing I believe you do as a leader, not a marketer, not a CMO, is to check in with your people, have conversations, and really help them understand how you are preparing your business to navigate a recession and be a healthy place where hopefully you don't have to do layoffs and things like that. So I would say that's number one.
It's such a good point. And it's funny because in all the thinking that we did in both July and August in huddles, I mean, we had, I think, about 10 different conversations looking at it in various ways. We never actually talked about that, which is, I think, profound. And now, of course, it presupposes you can't have that conversation unless you have a plan, right? It's like, I mean, you can say, hey, are you nervous about the recession? But unless you have a plan, it's kind of an awkward conversation. So let's talk about that and how your scenario planning that you all are doing that is something you could say to your employees and say, hey, these are the things that we are doing to, be the guys that can just say, what recession?
Yeah. I think, there's a number of things. Like when you start off the budget year, right, in January, you have an idea for how much you're going to spend on marketing, how much you're going to spend on demand gen, how much you're going to spend on technology, how much you're going to spend on new headcount. All of those change from month to month based on revenue, cost of goods sold, margin, things like that. So even outside of a recession, like we're trying to pull levers in expenses every day. But I do think one area is, and I don't like the word freeze, like hiring freeze, right? But one of the areas we are always looking at is if a company is not performing, or we feel like it may not perform in the near future as we expected it to in January, we have a fiduciary obligation to reduce spend. And it's not freezing things, it's simply pushing it out to see when it is responsible to spend it. And people get a little bit scared when they hear that, right? Because they go, oh my God, are we doing a hiring freeze here? No, we are pushing hires out, because guess what? Pushing hires out allows us to protect our current talent, our current teams, right? Like we are taking those measures to go all in on our current people. So we are looking at things like pushing hires out to make sure that we are hiring responsibly, and we are not taking on new responsibilities or strategies or tactics that we are not ready for, because we don't want to burn the teams out. And if we don't have the people to do it yet, we just can't take that on. So that's one example. We are looking at being a little more responsible with our discretionary marketing spend, things that are geared towards brand and not demand. We have a segment of dollars where we know exactly what the ROI is, and we know if we pull back on that, it will impact pipeline, it will impact revenue. But there are always areas of discretionary spending where a marketer can pull back. And if we pull back 5 or 10% in our budget, it does not mean that revenue or pipeline also is going to come back 5 or 10%.
And that's so interesting. Okay, I want to break this down, because and we had a lot of conversations in huddles about this as well. So we look at our, there's sort of 3 buckets, right? There's people, there's technology, and there's programs, right? And, they're in the huddles of the mix. If you look at the people and programs, there's some magic number, 50-50, 60-40, and then tech. It's funny, someone from shared that, Gartner has it 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of those 3. I don't know what the magic number is. It feels like spending 30% on technology is crazy, but what do I know? Anyway, so.
But marketers love new technology, Drew. Marketers.
I know.
Man,
come on. So you first look, and so if we look at people, programs, and tech, right? And we start with people, as you did, you have, you have a growth goal. And so in order to deliver that growth, you need to have more people, because in theory, the way you're spending money requires more people, yeah. Right? So if you don't hire more people, then how can you still say that we're going to hit the growth numbers that we were looking for? And that's the part. So let's just start there. There's got to be some correlation between the people that you're not hiring and the expectation of growth.
Yeah, we are still hiring. We're not putting a pause or pushing out all hires. When we look at a specific position or a specific, cost center or an area of investment, if we can say that definitively, if we invest $1 here, we're going to get $3 back. That's an investment. And even, barring a recession, diminishing that return, if you can articulate that is a growth investment, there's no reason that you should be pulling back on that head or that program, right? As long as you believe you can still get the return. So we are not pausing those hires. We're not pushing those hires back for the most part. It's really, as you look at kind of the discretionary areas, those are the areas that we're kind of targeting, right? And some of them do not have a defined ROI now, and they probably won't in the near future. So those are the areas we're focused on.
Interesting. Okay, so first presumption is that the CMO that's listening to this has a predictive engine such that they can actually look at this spending delivers this amount of ultimately revenue, obviously, but in the shorter term, I'll call it opportunities or, SQLs or whatever. And within some margin of error that if you keep spending this way and it keeps performing this way, you'll have this output.
Yes.
At the end of this magic rainbow. Okay. And so that's a big presumption, because I don't think if we were to survey 100 huddlers, they might say, maybe 60% of them have that in place.
Sure.
Right. So that's a big deal. So, we could probably break that down. And I would argue that if you don't have that in place, that's got to be probably a top priority for you.
Well, yeah, if you don't have that in place, then you are less prepared to be able to push back when a recession comes or the company is feeling a pinch and needs to find margin or SG&A dollars. Like if you do not have that defined, you are less able to push back on a CFO or somebody else who comes and says, hey, I need to take, a certain percentage of your marketing dollars and reallocate it somewhere else. How do you make that argument if you've not built that?
Yeah, you can, and you're vulnerable. You're really vulnerable. So you are the opposite of recession proof in that scenario. So I'm curious, when you have this predictive thing, is your CEO and CFO, all of them bought off and say, yes, Josh, you're right, this, and agree that this investment delivers this yield?
Yeah, attribution is it is a funny thing because it's not like sales where you go every activity leads to this pipeline leads right, and you can articulate that. But what's so important is that you come to an agreement on an attribution model with a few key people. First and foremost, like private equity or whoever your ownership structure looks like, it is so important that they understand how you measure marketing. And not just presenting it to them, but walking them through the formula. And the other ones are your CRO, right? Like it's so important that if you say marketing is producing this number of opportunities and pipeline and revenue, your CRO better back it up and understand it, right? Because if the marketer is the lone person when the CFO comes and says, hey, we need to take some of your marketing dollars or we need to cut back, if the CMO is the only one saying, wait, no, there's tons of value here, we're producing pipeline, like, man, if you don't have a CRO standing next to you or a CFO, that's on you because you've not built that relationship, the partnership, and you've not educated them on how marketing produces pipeline or revenue through attribution. So, those relationships, that education amongst your executive team is so important. Your CEO certainly must understand it. It is so helpful to make sure your sales leadership team understands contribution as marketing's contribution as well, and how we define that.
Yes, ditto. I'm just going to check on that in terms of building those relationships and assuring that we have agreement. It's funny, I was reviewing the conversation that the bonus huddle that we did with Hannes from Acronis on building a demand generation engine, a measurable engine and predictive. And we got to the question of brand and the role that brand played. And it's interesting to hear you say brand discretionary. And here's what I wonder about. At some point in time, Service Express is going to run into enterprise customers who haven't heard of you. And then suddenly brand is not a discretionary spend. It's a mandatory spend because you can't hit your numbers unless you have the awareness that you need. And it was interesting that this individual was able to sort of work in that formula, sort of looked at total addressable market, looked at what their awareness was, looked at what their awareness was going to need to be in order to get the growth they were looking for. So is it as simple as, the brand stuff just isn't measurable, so we can cut it and it won't have impact?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think you cut all brand, but you do have a responsibility. In good times, you typically have additional funding where you can spend more on. And by the way, marketers are always looking at new ways to spend brand dollars, right? And what we often do is we get enough money to be able to spend and try and break things and see what works and what doesn't. But when you hit a recession or tough economic times, there is a portion of brand spend I would suspect in most marketing organizations where you can cut it and it's not going to have a big impact because it really almost is kind of like the research and development side of brand spend. You're not quite sure if it's working or how it's working, but you can certainly cut it back during difficult times while still spending in the areas of brand that are important and meaningful.
Interesting. Well, I'm gonna put that on pause for a second. I asked you to take this recession preparedness calculator that we created with the help of this terrific app developer called Outgrow, and I'm curious. When you took it, were there any surprises? Did you feel you were as prepared as you thought you'd be?
Yeah, I think so. My score was 80 out of 100. The
Wow,
questions were
okay,
great,
you
by the
win.
way. 80 out of 100, but that's not a reflection of just me and what we're doing in marketing. It's a reflection of the business. Service Express, we do well in good times. We do even better in tough economic times because our buyers have already allocated the budget. The budget's out there. They tend to spend it on much high cost equipment, servers, storage, things like that. And so if they reallocate that to us and extend the life of their equipment, they actually reduce their spend by quite a bit while increasing their experience. So our business and our service model is set up well for a recession. And
was there any, what area did it suggest that you needed to work on? Because I mean, 80 out of 100 is awesome. Do you remember?
You know what? I don't remember which area, but let me
okay.
I took some. Yeah, I'll come back to me on that. I'll have to.
Okay, no problem. It's just you of course have now really screwed up the average, by the way. So a lot of people are going to come in and they're going to because we're building the average, from the first 25 or so people that take it. So now it's way up there. People are going to come in and go, oh my God, we're so far behind. Okay, last question before we switch gears for a second, which is, we've had a preview of what a recession might be in a kind of an awkward period when the pandemic started, right? And at that moment, a lot of brands, and I don't know if this was the case for you, sort of went full stop and a lot of things stopped. And what's interesting is for those brands that did that, they could also see the impact 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down in pipeline. And I'm curious, when the pandemic started, did you have a little bit of, turn some things off? And then could you see the lagging impact of that later down the road?
Yeah, we didn't turn things off, but we did push spend in some discretionary areas out. We did not reduce our sales dev initiatives. We did not reduce our demand marketing initiatives. We actually saw pipeline and revenue increase during that time because there was a supply chain issue with hardware components for servers, storage, so people couldn't get parts.
Right.
We had already stocked many of, just most of those parts in our technology center warehouse. And so the pandemic, while it was not good for our people and certainly our customers, it was good for our business because we were able to be helpful for our customers.
Right. So you suddenly were more essential than even you were before the pandemic. And that is something we'll talk about. Okay. We're going to switch gears. I'm going to switch gears now, and I'm going to do a little promo for CMO Huddles. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an exclusive community of over 100 highly effective B2B CMOs who share, care, and dare each other to greatness just about every week. Everything about CMO Huddles is designed to be a force multiplier, helping you to make faster, better, and more informed decisions. We ask for 1 hour a month in the hope of delivering 10 hours of perspiration saved. As we like to say, since no CMO can outwork their jobs, CMO Huddles is here to help you outsmart it. So Josh, you've already said some nice things about CMO Huddles. I'm just curious if you want to share your experience so far.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, CMO Huddles started for me, and I think CMO Huddles started in the pandemic. And it was there was a real need because CMOs had not navigated a total shutdown of our economy, of our businesses before. And I think in CMO fashion, we tend to be a group who love to share a lot with each other and learn a lot. We're by nature a curious group. CMO Huddles was kind of that point of light, every week and then every other week where, you literally could come and figure out like what little unlock did this CMO have that you could bring back to your organization and help your teams with. So CMO Huddles it gets back to the rip off and duplicate. Like, I'd never gone through a pandemic in my life before. I don't know how to lead as a CMO through a shutdown and people all of a sudden going and working totally from home. And I think getting in that environment where you had other CMOs navigating it and sharing the little unlocks that we each had, man, it accelerated our ability to be able to build healthy teams and performing teams during that period.
Amazing. And it's so funny you mentioned that period, because that was when we were in beta. We started April 1st, 2020, and we met in that beta period 55 times in a 6-month period. And you're right, for the first 8 weeks, we met every week because there was a new crisis every single week. So anyway, just in case you're not familiar with the huddles, generally most huddlers now join us for once a month. We are not, even though we have meetings every week, most huddlers join once a month. All right.
And by the way, Drew, I think you also have some of the best and brightest who are members of this group. It's, it is really an incredible group of CMOs who are in public companies, private equity companies, single owner companies. So there is a broad array of CMOs from different business models, different business sizes, and different verticals as well. So,
well, thank you for those kind words. We happen to have some recorded comments, which will allow you and I to go get our gin and our chill glasses. So, Melissa or Laura, can you run the tape?
I love the way that you are able to bring together experts and practitioners to share their experiences and to accelerate learning.
Just by listening, I've tripled my experience.
It's a great way to have these conversations with your peers.
Even if you miss, an actual live session, just the capture you guys do of the notes, the tidbits, the takeaways, just super valuable.
It's such a nice forum to be able to bond with other marketing leaders that are facing the same things that you are.
There's just so much goodness from the learnings and the dialogue and everything else.
So it's really nice to connect to peers that are B2B.
The Slack channel, I think, is amazing. There's just some really helpful ideas and thoughts and things being shared in there as a backstop underneath the Huddle actual meetings.
Because of the format of the CMO Huddles, there's, maybe 10, 15 people on each of the sub-tier groups, which makes it really easy to build one-on-one relationships.
It's a community that I think I really needed right now, so thank you.
If you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, ping me, Drew Neiser, on LinkedIn or apply at cmohuddles.com. All right, Melissa, let's taste some gin, shall we?
Yes. Okay, we're going to be tasting two fairly well-known gins today. So let's start with Hendrick's, which I don't want to give you... Well, yeah, I think this one's going to be the winner. That's my prediction. So let's try the Hendrick's. Hendrick's is made in Scotland. Yeah, that's it. That was what I was looking for. Hendrick's was made in Scotland in 1999 by distiller Leslie Gracie, one of the only female distillers that we've had featured on the show. She's it's distilled under William Grant and Sons, and it was named after William Grant's last surviving grandchild and Scotland's oldest woman. She's 110 years old, and she named the gin after her favorite rose gardener. So these botanicals are sourced from the garden that the gardener would have worked in. What do you think?
Must have been one heck of a gardener. I love Hendrick's. I always have loved Hendrick's. I like something that is a little more, I call it piney, but what's the official word for piney, Drew? Is it?
Well, it's the ginger, I think, that comes through.
Yeah.
Pretty profoundly.
Probably juniper would be
juniper.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Juniper. Sorry.
Juniper.
Not ginger. Mm-hmm. Ginger. What am I talking about?
And I love Hendrick's with a cucumber, by the way. Like, you put a cucumber in there, there's just something about the mellowing of it. So
yeah, that actually Hendrick's is infused with. Sorry, I think I might be a bit delayed, but Hendrix is infused with Bulgarian rose and cucumber. So the cucumber probably brings out that cucumber taste in it.
It's funny. I have gotten used to, just drinking it straight. I have to say, I love the New Amsterdam, and I'll tell you why. That lemony sort of refreshing. It's the afternoon. We're having a little gin. It's and a little slice of lemon in that, just straight up, is an easy gin. It's very smooth, and I like the citrusy aspect of the New Amsterdam. So today, I'm thinking New Amsterdam. I don't know.
Okay, you can absolutely smell the lemon. I didn't notice that, but as soon as you smell it, the lemon is very apparent.
Yeah, it's very citrus forward, and I kind of like it for, again, certain occasions. Straight up, put a little slice of lemon. Hendrix is, I would say, is a more robust gin in terms, more complex gin. Yeah. So, meanwhile, let's get our botanical expert on. Nicole, what the heck is elderflower? And hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? So some people have referred to elderflower as the ketchup of flavors. And this is because it seemingly can be used to make anything taste good. So that's a good tidbit. The elderflower comes from the elderberry bush. And when it's used authentically, it must be harvested immediately after it blossoms.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got to go find some elderflower blossoms. I've never seen elderflower seeds, but maybe we can grow it in our garden. All right, Nicole, thank you. Melissa, thank you. And Josh, you're picking which of the two?
Hendrix. I love the juniper. I love the pine. I got to go with Hendrix.
All right. We got a winner. All right. So now we're going to get back to the topic at hand. So let's talk about some of the things that several CMOs mention partnering with third parties like a Forrester to quantify the ROI of their service so that, and while others are baking ROI calculators into their products. Do you have any thoughts on either of these approaches? The whole idea is that you have third party or ways of demonstrating the value of your product or service on an ongoing basis to your customers.
Yeah, my initial thought is if it makes sense for your business, do it. It's a great tool. But does it, my question would be, does it pass the sniff test? Marketers are known for wanting to go for those gimmicks and kind of stretch the truth and the story a little bit. So if it doesn't make sense for your business, I would stay as far away from it as you can because buyers know. It's like bees sense fear, buyers sense BS, right? Like they know if your calculation is off or not. I would over-index on voice of the customer. The more you can get through written format, through videos, and especially through rating websites, the more you can get customers telling your story and articulating the real value that you provide, whether it's an ROI in dollars or if there are values somewhere else. Maybe you save X number of hours. Maybe you save staffing somewhere else, right? The more you can get buyers telling your story and talking about the value you provide, the more believable and authentic it is for the buyer. So I think calculators, if it makes sense for your business, do it, but don't take your foot off the gas on ensuring that customers are talking about the value you provide on your website, in your marketing materials. That's so critical.
I love that point. I want to just pause for a second on talk about, so some of the feedback that came back on the using these third parties to show the ROI was that it was really good for a short period of time because they would outlast it. The ones that were able to bake ROI into their product so that you could actually sort of see it there, thought it was awesome. And that again, not everybody can do that. Certain software service products can do it a lot easier than others. If you can do that, it's a great reminder. And it's a story that we were doing research for a former client a few years back, and one of the things that we learned during this research was that customer satisfaction correlated to those that had the analytics module. And so they were actually created a product where when it didn't have analytics in it, they weren't happy with it. When they had analytics, they were much happier. And it's like they were doing themselves a disservice by not forcing that bundle, right? And making sure. So again, this idea of having analytics. Now, the point you make about rating websites is really interesting to me, because I've always wondered about whether or not those are believable as well, because we all know that you can sort of incentivize customers to do it. You can bake it into the contract. You can do things to do it. So talk about how you've been able to get customers to go to these rating websites and provide, we'll call it, genuine answers.
Yeah, it starts with having a customer base who will advocate for you, right? If you don't have a customer base who identifies themselves as promoters or advocates, it's very tough to do, right? And I think the first thing you do is you ask customers, what websites do you use when you're evaluating a product or service? It was very apparent for us. Gartner Peer Insights. Gartner is kind of God for IT buyers, right? We've all heard of Gartner. Gartner Peer Insights was one of them. And so, from our perspective, like we have our own Net Promoter Score. It's a fantastic score. And as we encounter customers who are almost all of them who want to advocate for us, they will advocate. They just need to know how, right? They will provide referrals if you ask them. They will provide ratings if you ask them, if they know that that's an area that they can be helpful for you. And so, our senior account executives and our team are wired not to ask for positive reviews, but authentic, genuine reviews that help other buyers understand if we'd be a good fit or not for them. Proud to say we are number one in our space on Gartner Peer Insights. We are the only customer first. We're the only company to receive a customer first badge or designation from Gartner. And that is because we have fantastic engineers and wonderful customers who choose to advocate and promote.
And by the way, if those of you who take the link and use the recession calculator, one of the big areas in there that will determine how prepared you are is this question of customer loyalty and how the customers feel about your business and the likelihood that they, can live with or without you. And the more likely they can live without you, obviously, the more likely they're going to put your business on hold.
Are you a nice to have or have to have?
Yeah. And if you're a have to have business, obviously you're going to be, you're going to withstand a downturn a lot better than those that don't. So it does fit into this conversation really quite nicely. All right. So we're at the point where I always ask, what would Ben Franklin say? And, Ben was America's first chief marketing officer. That is why I talk about him a lot. He managed to do something that I think few marketers could do, which is market a revolution to a king. So one of the things is Ben was an inventive individual, as most of you know. But if he were looking at a business and saying, how do you prepare for recession? He would say, the way to be safe is never to be secure. And what we're talking about there and what he's referring to is the notion of preparation is if you think you've got this nailed, you are in a problem situation. So, all right. So at the top of the show, I mentioned CFOs famous for the minute there's a downturn, there's a sniff. It's like, okay, we got to cut marketing. and that's just, in a huddle, one CMO shared, if you cut my budget, you better cut your sales forecast because I am not a magician. I can't make something out of nothing. So I'm curious, what kinds of things can a CMO do in your mind, if that CMO comes running and say, look, the storm clouds are brewing and things, deals, for example, one of the things a lot of CMOs are seeing is deals are stretching out already. It used to be 3 months, now it's 6 months. And when that happens, everybody in the organization goes, uh-oh, it's a problem, because it means revenue is going to not land this quarter, but next quarter it may not land until next year. So what would you advise other CMOs to do to sort of stop that? Okay, you got to cut, we're not sure where we're going to be. You got to cut it by 15%. And that's not an uncommon request.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, if you're a CMO and you're in a position where the CFO is coming to you saying, we need to cut budget by 15, 20%, whatever the number is, and you are now having the conversation then about, hey, if you cut my budget, this is what you need to cut in pipeline. This is how it's going to impact revenue. You've already not done it right, because you should be having those conversations on a regular basis, and the CFO should be informed about marketing's contribution to pipeline or revenue. So, I hate to be that guy, but you've probably not already done it right. That's okay. You can still fix that. It's an opportunity for you to work through that. And I would say number 2 is, does the CRO agree with it, right? If the CMO is the lone wolf saying, if you cut my budget, revenue is going to go down, but you're the only one standing there, and you don't have a CRO backing you up, or a CEO backing you up, or members of your board of directors backing you up, then you probably need to second guess yourself. And I'd say the only other thing I'd say here, Drew, is sometimes marketers can get very defensive about budgets. And I'm not saying don't push back. There are times to push back, but CMOs are officers of the company first and marketers second. Our job is to be officers of the company, just like the CFO. The CFO is coming at it from a company perspective. They have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that we're spending appropriately. And if the CFO knows that $1 invested in marketing is going to get you $3 in revenue, and when, the CFO is not going to, beat on you, especially if you've got the buy-in and support of other members of the executive team. So be an officer of the company first. And if you can articulate investment, and if you believe in that ROI, make sure you're outlining that. But it can't be anecdotal, and you have to have allies. Otherwise, you are on a hill by yourself, and you're probably going to die alone.
It's so true. And, in the calculator, that's one of the questions is, and one of the answers, the solution suggested, if you're not already meeting with your CFO regularly, and if they don't have a clear understanding of marketing's impact on revenue, then you have a problem. And the calculator also points and prescribes doing an audit of people, programs, and technology, so you're ready. I mean, why wait? If you did have to cut and be an officer of the company, you're going to have to look at those 3 things. And I think this is what's so different than 10 or 20 years ago. Because if in marketing 10 or 20 years ago, first of all, you weren't spread across so many digital places, you didn't have as much technology. But let's assume for a moment that, Gartner's right, and people are spending 1/3 on tech, and 1/3 on programs, and 1/3 on people. What's so tricky here is, if you cut people, you won't have enough to execute programs. If you cut programs, you won't have enough. Your people won't, will be problematic. And if you cut tech, you probably need to cut people, because there are always people associated with tech, and some programs won't be able to be executed without the tech. So how do you, if you were looking at this thing, and I want to start with tech, is there and I'm assuming that you've done an audit of all your marketing technology and so forth. Do you know off the top of your head, there's some ones that we've been testing that we can probably get by without?
We are always top grading the system. So I agree. When you think the greatest area of danger for a marketer, and this is me too, because I love technology, love technology. Love the promise of technology. I understand sometimes the promise is greater than your ability to execute on it sometimes. But technology is something that once you buy it, you are locked in. You can't just cut technology, right? You are locked in by ironclad SaaS contracts for at least a year, but typically 2 to 3 years. And so if you over-index on technology today, or if you did last year, guess what? You're going to have to cut. You are going to have to cut in people, in programs, right? So one of the most responsible things a CMO can do is make sure they've got somebody looking at technology and scaling technology up, meaning don't buy all of the licenses today, even if it costs you a little more in the long run, right? If you feel like you're going to need 200 licenses over a period of time, guess what? Buy 100 today. Make sure they get utilized, because I guarantee there are always going to be users who do not utilize it right. And you can redeploy licenses. Technology is the one area that CMOs just have to be uber responsible about, because it has a long tail impact on people and programs if you over-index or go too deep into it.
Well, and so many thoughts swirling in my head on that, and thinking of, first of all, most of these folks, you can get a 1-year contract, and you're right, you don't get the same deal. But if you're looking at any new technology, but I think consistently marketers have underestimated the amount of time and support it takes to take advantage of it. And second, that some of these tools have more things that they could be doing that you're not doing because you don't have enough staff already. Yeah. So be be careful about obviously getting new stuff. And I wonder, because this happened at the beginning of the pandemic, and I wonder if it really got ugly, if you could go back to some of these software companies and say, look, we're not cutting you, but we need to put a pause or something. Can you help us out here? Because, it's an impossible situation for everyone. And there was a lot of willingness during the pandemic, the beginning days of the pandemic, to negotiate. Yeah. So, and that's something to also think about. You to give yourself some flexibility, because most technology is not marketing.
Yeah.
It's just a tool.
Yeah.
And this is the part, this is me ranting for a bit, and I talk about this in my book a lot, is I think it's crazy, the notion that you might spend a third of your budget on marketing. On technology. I mean, it feels absurd. That's not marketing. It's technology.
Yeah, I agree, Drew. And I think, especially as you start to enter tough economic times, potentially a recession, in good times, it's okay for marketers to go wide, right? And to try to dip their toes in a lot of different channels while maintaining their success in the channels where they're successful. In tough economic times, I think you're spot on. There are technologies where marketers are not even using all the functionality or features in it. Like in tough economic times, that is when you go deep. You go deep on technology and understand how you can fully exploit it before you bring on new technology. You look at your website, which is your greatest digital asset, by the way, and the single greatest way that you can convert prospects to leads and opportunities and pipeline, right? And I think during tough economic times, as you look at your website, search engine optimization, your content strategy, most marketers, including me and my teams, as we look at it, we can go a heck of a lot deeper here, right? And we know that this is an asset, and we know that it's going to build value. And so what you do is you stop going so wide with your strategies, if that makes sense, and you go really deep on the ones that are going to make a difference and are going to build value for the business. One is technology that you already have, exhausting all the features and capabilities there, not bringing in new ones and stretching your people thin. The other is looking at the channels that are already successful and going even deeper on those.
So interesting. And as I'm thinking about this conversation, a few things come to mind. So as we're thinking about recession planning and things that you can do right now, let's just assume your business is just humming along. So number one is, and this was Josh's thought, that is talking to your people and letting them know that you're thinking about this and that you are making contingency plans, and you will share those contingency plans in the event of it, so that there's this open line of communication with employees who may be hearing the doom and gloom news. And, I just think being prepared on all fronts makes sense, even if we don't have a recession, because most of the things that we're talking about doing on the show are just good marketing sense, right? I mean, secondly, reaching out to your customers and saying, hey, would you write a review for us? Or are you happy enough to write a review? This is the moment where if you don't have strong customer relationships, you're going to really feel it. But if you do, this is the time where you can really separate yourself from the pack. And if they will step up. And then from a third standpoint, you talked a lot about acquisition and thinking about the dollars that you spend that you know that drive results and go doubling down on those things. Those are great thoughts. I'm curious if you have final words of wisdom for your fellow CMOs on how to recession-proof their marketing.
Yeah, I think the final word would be, again, doubling down on leadership, not marketing. In the absence of communication, there will be a void in the minds of your people, and negativity will always fill that void. And your role as a leader is to create an environment where they feel safe, because they can't do their best work if they don't feel safe. They can't innovate if they don't feel safe. So double down on leadership. Number two, I think, secondly, I would say, as the economy constricts and budgets constrict, go further down the funnel, meaning your focus on customer is critical. We talked about that, right? But also your focus on people who already are aware, they're in the sales funnel, they are already aware of who you are, what you do, probably the value prop. They've probably met with individuals on the sales team. These are areas where marketing can actually improve win rates and conversion rates, and work very closely with sales to have more immediate impact on revenue if they focus there, as opposed to trying to attract all these leads. Leads are important. It brings in net new business, right? But where budgets constrict, where the economy has downward pressure, I go lower in the place, a greater focus on going lower in the funnel, and reduce my reliance and investment at the top of the sales funnel.
Yeah, again, great advice. So I'm thinking back in a huddle where a CMO suggested that the notion of demand generation was sort of really off, and that what you're describing there is demand capture. These are folks that have raised their hand, that are in the market, they're actually going to buy. And if marketers can focus on those folks that are already there, that's a part of your recession proofing strategy. Demand generation is really all the top of the funnel stuff that, chances are they may not be in the market. And so you really do need to focus on those folks that are in the market. The other thing I just want to circle back to, because I think it was such a profound thing, is that people drive growth. You can't grow a company as fast as Service Express has grown without growing your people. And I just think that's a beautiful thought to end the show with. So Josh, you're a fantastic sport. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, audience, for staying with us. Please join us in 3 weeks when we'll be talking about ABM with some super savvy CMO huddlers. Cue the music. Renegade Marketers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our intern is Laura Parkin. Our botanical expert is Nicole Hernandez. For show notes, past episodes, and the latest on my book, Renegade Marketing 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands, please visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.